My father-in-law called me a failure. He didn't know I was his new boss. You're a failure, Mark. Always have been, always will be. Roger's words cut through the birthday dinner conversation like a serrated knife, silencing the entire table. My wife Sarah's face went pale, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. Even my 8-year-old nephew stopped mid-chew, sensing the sudden tension crackling through the air at Olive Garden. Dad, please, Sarah started, but Roger held up his weathered hand, the same gesture I'd seen him use to dismiss subordinates at company picnics. No, Sarah. Someone needs to tell your husband the truth. He leaned back in his chair, his gray mustache twitching with satisfaction. 32 years old, and what do you have to show for it? A middle management position at some consulting firm nobody's heard of. Meanwhile, I've been with Meridian Industries for 18 years. 18 years of steady work, steady promotions. I gripped my water glass tighter, forcing myself to stay calm. This was supposed to be my mother-in-law's 60th birthday celebration, not another episode of Roger humiliates Mark in public. But here we were, same script, different venue. I do well enough, I said quietly, cutting into my chicken parmigiana with deliberate precision. Roger snorted. Well enough? You drive a 2019 Honda Civic, Mark. I drive a 2023 BMW X5. You rent that tiny apartment downtown. We own our home, paid off the mortgage early because I understand what real success looks like. Sarah's mother, Linda, touched Roger's arm gently. Honey, maybe we should. Linda, our daughter deserves better. His voice carried that authoritative tone he perfected during his years as a senior operations coordinator at Meridian Industries. I've watched Mark flounder for 7 years. 7 years of empty promises about promotions that never come, projects that go nowhere, big talk with nothing to back it up. The irony wasn't lost on me. In exactly 9 days, not that I was counting, Roger would discover just how much his world was about to change. The confidential executive search that had consumed the last 4 months of my life, the grueling interview process with Meridian's board of directors, the background checks and reference calls, none of it would matter until Monday, September 18th, when I walked into the executive conference room as the company's new vice president of operations. Roger's new boss. You know what your problem is, Mark? Roger continued, pointing his fork at me like a weapon. No backbone. No vision. You're content being mediocre, and that's exactly what you'll always be. I nodded slowly, taking another bite. The chicken tasted like cardboard, but I chewed methodically, buying time. Around us, other families enjoyed their meals, their conversations filled with laughter instead of systematic character assassination. You're probably right, Roger, I said finally, meeting his steel gray eyes. I should probably aim higher. He laughed, actually laughed, like I told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. Aim higher. Mark, you couldn't hit the broad side of a barn if you were standing inside it. Sarah's hand found mine under the table, squeezing apologetically. This dance was as familiar as breathing now. Roger would attack, I would deflect, Sarah would feel torn between defending me and keeping peace with her father, and Linda would try unsuccessfully to redirect the conversation towards safer topics. But this time felt different. This time, I had a secret burning in my chest like a coal, warming me against the chill of his contempt. We'll see, I said softly, raising my water glass in a mock toast. Here's to aiming higher. Roger clinked his glass against mine, smiling like a predator who just spotted wounded prey. The drive home was suffocating. Sarah stared out the passenger window, her reflection ghostlike against the streetlights sliding past. We'd made it through the rest of dinner in relative peace. Linda had steered the conversation toward my nephew's soccer season, but Roger's words hung between us like toxic fog. He doesn't mean it, Sarah said finally as I pulled into our apartment complex parking lot. It was the same thing she always said, delivered in that tired voice that told me she didn't quite believe it anymore. Doesn't he? I turned off the engine, letting the silence stretch. Sarah, your father just spent 20 minutes explaining to your entire family why you married a loser. In public. On your mother's birthday. She turned to face me, her dark eyes reflecting the fluorescent security lights. He's frustrated at work. They passed him over for that promotion to regional coordinator last month. He's taking it out on you. I almost laughed. If she only knew that Roger's workplace frustrations were about to get exponentially worse. The promotion he'd been passed over for, the one he'd complained about during our last 3 family gatherings, had gone to someone else because the entire operations department was about to be restructured. Under my leadership. That doesn't make it okay, I said, getting out of the car. Inside our apartment, Sarah kicked off her heels and collapsed onto our second-hand couch. I know it doesn't. But what am I supposed to do, Mark? Cut off contact with my parents? Choose sides? I'm not asking you to choose sides. I loosened my tie, the same navy blue one I'd worn to my final interview with Meridian's CEO 3 weeks ago. I'm asking you to stop making excuses for him. Sarah pulled a throw pillow against her chest. He wasn't always like this with you. Remember when we first started dating? He liked you then. She was right. For the first year, Roger had been cautiously approving. I was pursuing my MBA, working at a respected consulting firm, driving a decent car. But as time passed and my career didn't skyrocket according to his timeline, the criticism had started. Subtle at first, questions about my 5-year plan, comments about other sons-in-law who were really going places. Then increasingly direct as I failed to meet his escalating expectations. The breaking point had come 2 years ago at Christmas. I'd just been promoted to senior analyst, a significant step up that I was proud of. Roger had listened to my announcement, nodded once, and said, senior analyst. Fancy title for middle management. Then he turned to his brother-in-law and started talking about his neighbor's son who just made partner at a law firm. Things change, I said, heading toward the bedroom. People change. What's that supposed to mean? I paused in the doorway. The secret felt like a physical weight in my chest, pressing against my ribs. Sarah deserved to know. She was my wife, my partner in everything. But Meridian's HR director had been crystal clear during my orientation packet signing, absolute confidentiality until the official announcement. Too many moving parts, too many personnel changes that needed to be coordinated. If word leaked early, especially to current employees, it could derail everything. It means I'm tired of being his punching bag, I said instead. And I'm tired of you expecting me to just take it. Sarah's face crumpled slightly. That's not fair. Maybe it wasn't. But neither was sitting through another dinner while my father-in-law cataloged my failures for public consumption. Neither was watching my wife's face every time her father spoke, seeing her wince and knowing she was calculating the emotional cost of defending me versus keeping family peace. I'm going to bed, I said. Long day tomorrow. Friday, September 8th, 10 days until Roger's world turned upside down. But who was counting? The weekend crawled by like torture. Saturday morning, I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop, pretending to work on a consulting proposal while actually reviewing the confidential Meridian organizational charts I'd received. Roger's name appeared in a neat little box under Senior Operations Coordinator, soon to report directly to me through 2 levels of management I was about to restructure. Sarah made pancakes, her peace offering for the tension still lingering from Friday night. I called my mom this morning, she said, sliding a plate in front of me. Dad wants to apologize. I looked up from my screen. He wants to apologize. Well, she thinks he should apologize. There's a difference. Sarah sat down across from me, not quite meeting my eyes. But he did say something interesting. Apparently there are rumors about big changes coming to Meridian. New leadership being brought in from outside. My heart stuttered. I kept my expression neutral, cutting into the pancakes with surgical precision. Really? Dad's worried about his job security. You know how he gets when he feels threatened, he lashes out at everyone around him. She reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. I'm not excusing what he said, but maybe it explains the intensity lately. If she only knew how right she was about the intensity. Roger's department wasn't just getting new leadership, it was getting completely overhauled. I'd spent hours studying the operational inefficiencies that my predecessor had identified but never addressed. Roger's unit was hemorrhaging money due to outdated processes and resistance to modernization. Guess who'd been leading that resistance for the past 3 years? Did he say anything specific about these rumors? I asked, loading my fork with pancake and trying to sound casually interested. Just that some hotshot executive was being brought in over everyone's heads. He used some choice words about outsiders who don't understand how things really work. Sarah smiled ruefully. You know, Dad, he thinks 18 years at the same company makes him irreplaceable. The irony was delicious. Roger had been complaining for months about upper management's failure to recognize his value, his years of dedication, his deep understanding of Meridian's operations. What he didn't realize was that his deep understanding consisted mainly of institutional knowledge about ineffective processes and an unwillingness to adapt to industry changes. My phone buzzed with a text message. Dr. Patricia Kim, Meridian's VP of Human Resources, final paperwork ready for pickup Monday morning at 7 a.m. Executive parking spot number 3 reserved. Welcome to the team. I set the phone face down quickly, but not before Sarah noticed my slight smile. Good news, she asked. Just a client responding about a proposal. Sunday afternoon brought the real curveball. We were at Target, picking up groceries, when Sarah's phone rang. Her face shifted from casual to concerned as she answered. Hi, Mom. What's wrong? I continued pushing our cart down the cereal aisle, but I could hear Linda's voice through the phone, high-pitched, worried. He what? Sarah stopped walking entirely. Mom, slow down. What do you mean he confronted his manager? Ice formed in my stomach. I abandoned the cart and moved closer to Sarah. When did this happen? Sarah's eyes found mine, wide with alarm. Friday. After dinner with us. Linda's voice became clearer as Sarah held the phone away from her ear slightly. Went into work early, demanded to know about the management changes, accused them of keeping him in the dark after 18 years of loyalty. Oh no, Sarah whispered. What did his manager say? Told him to mind his own business and focus on his current responsibilities. Roger got loud, said he deserved respect and transparency. HR got involved. My chest tightened. Roger's manager, David Chen, Senior Director of Operations, would report to me starting Monday. If Roger had created a scene, David would definitely mention it during our first meeting. Is Dad in trouble? Sarah asked. Formal written warning for insubordinate behavior and disrupting workplace operations. One more incident and they'll start termination proceedings. Sarah met my eyes, her face pale. Roger had just dug his own grave, and he didn't even know his new boss was standing 3 feet away, holding a box of Cheerios and trying not to panic. This was going to be more complicated than I'd thought. The formal written warning changed everything. Sunday night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Sarah slept fitfully beside me, occasionally mumbling her father's name. The weight of what I knew pressed down like a lead blanket. In less than 12 hours, I'd walk into Meridian Industries as Vice President of Operations. Roger's ultimate supervisor. The man who would decide his fate after his spectacular Friday morning meltdown. At 3:47 a.m., I gave up on sleep and padded to the kitchen. My laptop sat closed on the counter, containing all the confidential files I'd been studying for weeks. Personnel reviews, performance metrics, departmental restructuring plans. Roger's employee file painted a picture I'd suspected but never confirmed, 18 years of adequate performance punctuated by increasing resistance to change and 3 previous warnings for attitude issues with supervisory staff. Friday's incident made it 4 warnings. At most companies, that would mean immediate termination. But Meridian had a complex progressive discipline policy, something about protecting long-term employees from arbitrary dismissal. Roger had exactly 1 strike left. And I was about to become the person holding the bat. My phone buzzed with an email from Dr. Patricia Kim, timestamp 6:23 a.m. Mark, hope you're ready for your first day. Quick heads up, we've had some personnel issues in operations over the weekend. David Chen will brief you during your 9 a.m. department overview. Nothing that should impact your transition plans, but wanted you to be aware. Looking forward to working with you. Patricia. Personnel issues in operations. My stomach churned as I poured coffee with shaking hands. Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway at 7:15, already dressed in her scrubs for her nursing shift. "You're up early." "Big day," I said, which was the understatement of the century. She kissed my cheek, tasting like toothpaste and worry. "I'm going to call Dad before work, see how he's doing. Mom said he barely slept all weekend." "Sarah, maybe," I caught myself before suggesting she avoid contact with Roger today. How could I explain that without revealing why? Maybe give him some space to cool down first. "He's scared, Mark. 18 years at that company and now he thinks they're going to push him out for some 20-something MBA with no real-world experience." She grabbed her purse from the counter. "You know how that feels, right? Being underestimated." The irony was suffocating. "Yeah. I know exactly how that feels." After Sarah left, I stood in front of my closet for 10 minutes, staring at my clothes like they might reveal some cosmic answer. What do you wear when you're about to become your father-in-law's boss? The navy suit felt too formal, the khakis too casual. Finally, I settled on charcoal gray slacks, white dress shirt, and a burgundy tie, professional but not intimidating. The drive to Meridian Industries took 23 minutes through Monday morning traffic. I'd made this trip dozens of times for company social events, always as Sarah's husband, Roger's disappointing son-in-law. Today, I was driving to the executive parking garage, level P1, space number 3. The security guard at the main entrance smiled as he handed me a temporary badge. "Mr. Williams. Dr. Kim is waiting for you in the executive conference room, 14th floor. Congratulations on joining the Meridian family." Meridian family. The phrase felt loaded with meaning as I rode the elevator up, watching the floor numbers climb past Roger's third-floor operations department. In about 2 hours, after my orientation meetings and paperwork, David Chen would brief me on the weekend's personnel issues. I'd have to pretend I didn't know exactly which employee had exploded at management, didn't know his social security number and home address, didn't know he'd be sitting down for Sunday dinner next week expecting the same old dynamic. The elevator dinged softly as we reached the 14th floor. Game time. The executive conference room felt like a different planet. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, leather chairs surrounded a mahogany table that probably cost more than my car, and the coffee, God, the coffee actually tasted expensive. Dr. Patricia Kim sat across from me, sliding a stack of documents my way with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times. "Standard VP package," she said, her manicured finger tapping each section. "Salary confirmation at $185,000 annually, plus performance bonuses. Stock options vest after 2 years. Company BMW X7, ironically, an upgrade from what most of our senior staff drive." I nearly choked on the coffee. $185,000. Roger's BMW X5 that he'd thrown in my face Friday night. My company car would make his look like a Honda Civic. Your direct reports include David Chen, Senior Director of Operations, and Maria Santos, Director of Process Improvement. Between them, they oversee 43 employees across 6 departments. Patricia's tablet chimed softly. "Speaking of David, he's requested to move your 9 a.m. meeting to 8:45. Some urgent personnel matter that needs your attention." My hand stayed steady as I signed document after document, but inside, my pulse hammered against my ribcage. What kind of personnel matter? Insubordination incident Friday morning. Long-term employee, good technical skills, but apparently he had some kind of breakdown about the management transition. She shrugged. "David will give you the full details, but between you and me, this employee's been skating on thin ice for months. The timing is just unfortunate, your first day and all." At exactly 8:43 a.m., David Chen knocked on the conference room door. Mid-40s, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of calm competence that probably made him invaluable during crisis management. He shook my hand with genuine warmth. "Mark, welcome aboard. Patricia, thanks for accommodating the schedule change." He settled into a chair, pulling out a tablet and what looked like an incident report. "I wanted to brief you on Friday's situation before you meet the rest of the team." "I appreciate that," I managed. Roger Hartley, Senior Operations Coordinator. 18 years with the company, solid technical knowledge, but he's been increasingly resistant to departmental changes over the past 2 years. David's finger traced down the report. Friday morning, 7:30 a.m., he cornered me in the parking lot demanding to know about management restructuring rumors. When I told him that personnel decisions weren't his concern, he followed me to my office and raised his voice loud enough that half the floor heard him. My throat felt dry. What exactly did he say? Quote, "I've given 18 years to this company while hotshot consultants get handed promotions they haven't earned. Someone needs to tell upper management that loyalty matters more than fancy degrees and buzzword presentations." David looked up from the tablet. He specifically mentioned outside executives being brought in without understanding how things really work. The irony burned like acid in my chest. Roger had been ranting about me, to my direct report, while demanding information about my appointment. What was HR's response? Formal written warning for insubordination and creating a hostile work environment. Thing is, Mark, this was his 4th documented incident in 3 years. Company policy allows for immediate termination after the 5th occurrence. David closed the tablet, meeting my eyes directly. "I need to know how you want to handle this. Roger's technically competent, knows our systems inside and out, but his attitude affects team morale. Half the staff walks on eggshells around him." Patricia Kim had quietly excused herself during David's briefing, leaving us alone with a decision that felt impossibly weighted. Fire Roger immediately for cause, or give him one final chance to adapt to new management. My father-in-law's career literally rested in my hands. "When does the staff typically arrive?" I asked, buying time. "Core team's here by 9:15. Roger usually arrives at 8:45 sharp, military background, very punctual." David checked his watch. "Actually, he's probably pulling into the parking lot right now." Through the conference room windows, I could see the employee parking garage. Somewhere down there, Roger was getting out of his BMW X5, straightening his tie, preparing for another day of the job that defined his entire identity. He had no idea his son-in-law was 14 floors above him, deciding his fate. "I'd like to observe the department dynamics before making any personnel decisions," I said finally. Can you arrange for me to meet the team this morning, including Mr. Hartley? David nodded slowly. Of course. But Mark, if Roger creates another scene, then we'll handle it appropriately. At 9 a.m. exactly, I followed David Chen toward the elevator that would take us down to the third floor. To Roger's floor. The elevator ride to the third floor felt like descending into hell. David made small talk about quarterly performance metrics, but his words sounded muffled, like I was hearing them through water. When the doors opened with a soft ding, the familiar scent of industrial carpet and coffee hit me, the same smell that clung to Roger's clothes after every workday for 7 years. Operations is down this hall, David said, leading me past a series of cubicles and small offices. Roger's workspace is the corner office, technically not an office, but he claimed that desk 15 years ago and nobody's had the energy to fight him on it. Through the maze of workstations, I could see him. Roger Hartley, Senior Operations Coordinator, sitting ramrod straight at his desk, pecking at his keyboard with the two-finger typing method he'd never bothered to improve. He wore a crisp white shirt and navy tie, the same combination he favored for family dinners when he wanted to emphasize his professional status. Team meeting in conference room B in 5 minutes, David announced to the floor. I want everyone to meet our new VP of Operations. The effect was immediate. Conversation stopped, chairs swiveled, and 43 pairs of eyes turned toward us. Roger's head snapped up from his computer screen, and for one terrible moment, our eyes met across the office floor. I watched his face cycle through confusion, recognition, and something that looked like physical nausea. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him pale beneath his permanent Florida tan. Is that, a woman at the nearest cubicle started to say. Mark Williams, our new vice president, David confirmed, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent floor. He comes to us from executive consulting with extensive experience in operational restructuring. Roger stood up so abruptly his chair rolled backward into the wall. The sound echoed through the quiet space like a gunshot. His hands gripped the edge of his desk, knuckles white against the dark wood surface. Conference room B, everyone, David repeated. 5 minutes. The floor exploded into whispered conversations as employees began moving toward the meeting room. I caught fragments, thought he looked familiar. Isn't that Rogers? No way, that's the same guy from the Christmas party. Roger remained frozen at his desk, staring at me like I was a ghost. Or maybe like he was seeing his own ghost, the specter of every humiliating comment he'd made about my career prospects, every dismissive gesture, every public character assassination over the past 7 years. Roger, David called out. You coming? That snapped him out of his paralysis. He straightened his tie, a nervous habit I recognized from tense family gatherings, and walked toward us with the stiff gait of a man heading to his own execution. As he got closer, I could see the sweat beading on his forehead despite the building's aggressive air conditioning. Mark, he said when he reached us, his voice barely above a whisper. The same voice that had declared me a failure 3 days ago was now cracking with uncertainty. Roger. I kept my tone neutral, professional. Looking forward to working with you. His face went another shade paler. Behind him, I could see other employees filing into the conference room, their voices a low buzz of speculation and confusion. You, Roger started, then stopped. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. You're the new VP. That's right. David was watching our exchange with growing confusion. Do you two know each other? The question hung in the air like smoke. Roger's eyes darted between David and me, calculating the implications of any answer he might give. His mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. We've met, I said finally. Shall we start the meeting? Roger nodded mutely and followed us toward conference room B, where 42 employees waited to meet their new boss. The man who'd called me a failure was about to discover exactly how wrong he'd been. Conference room B felt like a courtroom, and I was simultaneously judge, jury, and the accused. 43 employees packed around an oval table that was meant for 20, with late arrivals standing against the walls. The air conditioning struggled against the body heat, and someone had made coffee so weak it looked like tea. Roger sat 3 seats to my left, his hands folded so tightly his wedding ring was cutting into his finger. He hadn't said a word since we'd entered the room, but I could practically hear his thoughts racing. Every few seconds, he'd glance at me, then quickly look away like I might catch fire if he stared too long. I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, I said, standing at the head of the table. The conversations died immediately. Change is never easy, especially when it affects people who've dedicated years to building something they believe in. A woman in her 50s, Janet Morrison, according to the org chart I'd memorized, raised her hand tentatively. Will there be layoffs? That depends entirely on adaptation and performance moving forward, I replied honestly. My job isn't to fire people. It's to make this department more efficient and profitable. But that requires everyone's cooperation. Roger's hands tightened further. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. David Chin pulled up a PowerPoint presentation on the wall screen. Mark has identified several operational inefficiencies that have cost us roughly $2.3 million over the past 18 months. We're going to walk through the proposed changes. The first slide made Roger visibly flinch, legacy process elimination. His pet project for the past 4 years, a manual inventory tracking system that he'd refused to digitize, was highlighted in red as priority restructuring item number 1. The current inventory process requires 14 manual checkpoints and averages 3.2 hours per cycle, I explained, watching Roger's face grow increasingly ashen. Industry standard is 45 minutes using integrated software platforms. But the manual system catches errors the computers miss, Roger said suddenly, his voice tight with desperation. I've prevented countless shipping mistakes over the years. 42 pairs of eyes swiveled between us. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Could you elaborate on those errors, Mr. Hartley? I kept my voice level, professional. Roger's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Well, I mean, there have been. I've caught, the computers don't understand the nuances of. According to the data, the manual system has resulted in 127 documented errors this quarter alone, David interjected, consulting his tablet. The digital alternative would have caught 119 of those automatically. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Roger's face had gone from pale to gray, and his breathing was shallow. I've been here 18 years, he said finally, his voice cracking. 18 years of dedication, of loyalty. You can't just, he stopped abruptly, realizing he was about to repeat Friday's performance in front of his new boss. His new boss who happened to be the son-in-law he'd humiliated 3 days ago. Experience is valuable, Mr. Hartley, I said carefully. But adaptation is essential. The question is whether you're willing to learn new systems and approaches. Roger stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Or the dawning realization that every dismissive comment, every public humiliation, every prediction of my failure was about to come back and bite him. His career was in the hands of the man he'd called worthless. Yes, he whispered. I'm willing to learn. The meeting continued for another hour, but the real conversation was happening in the glances between Roger and me. The first day passed in a blur of meetings, handshakes, and carefully neutral conversations. By 5 p.m., most of the department had filtered out, leaving behind the lingering smell of stress sweat and burned coffee. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my new office, corner suite, 14th floor, with a view that made Roger's third-floor window look like a prison cell, when David knocked. How'd it feel, he asked, settling into one of the leather chairs across from my mahogany desk. Like defusing a bomb while riding a unicycle, I admitted. Tell me about Roger's work relationships. Honest assessment. David's expression darkened. Honestly? He's toxic, Mark. Decent guy one-on-one, knows the technical side better than anyone, but he undermines every change initiative. Last month, when we tried implementing the new scheduling software, he spent 2 weeks telling anyone who'd listen that it would never work. Half the team was convinced we were setting them up for failure before we even started the pilot program. I thought about Sarah's words from the weekend, Dad's worried about his job security. You know how he gets when he feels threatened, What about the other incidents? You mentioned this was his 4th warning. March 2022, he accused his previous supervisor of age discrimination when she assigned him to train new hires on digital processes. August 2022, he went over my head to complain about unrealistic efficiency expectations directly to the regional director. January this year, he had a meltdown during a team meeting about consultants who've never worked a real day in their lives. David paused meaningfully. That last one feels pretty relevant now. The irony was suffocating. For months, Roger had been ranting about outside consultants taking over his department. Now that outside consultant was me. There's something else, David continued, lowering his voice. Roger's been asking questions. Lots of questions. About your background, your previous employers, how the hiring process worked. Janet from HR mentioned he requested to see your resume. Ice formed in my stomach. Did she give it to him? No, but Mark, he's digging. And some of the other employees are starting to connect dots. They remember you from company Christmas parties, summer picnics. It won't take long before everyone knows you're related. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Dad wants to talk to you. Says it's important. Can you call him when you get home? My hands were shaking as I typed back, long day at work. Maybe tomorrow. Everything okay? David asked, noting my expression. Just family stuff. I closed the quarterly report, my concentration shot. David, I need you to keep our conversation about Roger confidential for now. I'm still evaluating the situation. Of course. But Mark, if he creates another scene. I know. I stood up, straightening my tie, the same nervous gesture I'd inherited from watching Roger at family dinners. One more incident and he's gone. The drive home felt like traveling through quicksand. Every red light gave me more time to imagine how this conversation with Roger would go. Would he apologize? Demand an explanation? Accuse me of some elaborate scheme to humiliate him? My phone rang as I pulled into my apartment complex. Sarah's number. Hey, I answered, trying to sound normal. Mark, where are you? Dad's been calling every 30 minutes. He's really shaken up. Her voice carried that familiar strain, the sound of someone caught between competing loyalties. He won't tell Mom what happened at work today, but he looks like he's seen a ghost. He has, I thought. He's seen the ghost of every cruel prediction he made about my future. I'm just pulling in now, I said. Rough first day at the new job. New job. Sarah's voice sharpened. What new job? Mark, what aren't you telling me? I closed my eyes, sitting in my Honda Civic in space number 47 of our middle-tier apartment complex, still wearing the $300 suit I'd bought for my Meridian interviews. In 12 hours, I'd gone from Roger's disappointing failure of a son-in-law to his direct supervisor. Sarah deserved to know. Hell, she deserved to know weeks ago. I'll explain everything when I get upstairs, I said finally. Sarah, your father called me a failure on Friday night. Today, he found out exactly how wrong he was. The silence stretched for 10 seconds that felt like 10 years. Mark, Sarah whispered, what did you do? The apartment felt like a pressure cooker when I walked through the door. Sarah was pacing between the kitchen and living room, her nursing scrubs wrinkled from a 12-hour shift, her dark hair escaping from its ponytail in frazzled wisps. She'd been crying, I could tell from the slight puffiness around her eyes, though she tried to hide it. Start talking, she said without preamble. Dad called 6 times in the last hour. He won't explain what happened, just keeps saying he needs to speak with you urgently. Mom's practically sedated him with chamomile tea, but he's pacing around their house like a caged animal. I loosened my tie, the burgundy one that had felt so confident this morning and now felt like a noose. Remember 4 months ago when I told you I was pursuing some new consulting opportunities? The confidential project you couldn't discuss. Sarah stopped pacing, her nurse's instincts reading the gravity in my voice. Mark, please tell me you didn't do anything vindictive. I got a job, Sarah. A real job. The kind Roger's been telling me I'd never be qualified for. I pulled out my phone, showing her the email confirmation from HR, Vice President of Operations at Meridian Industries. $185,000 base salary plus bonuses. I started today. The color drained from her face as she read the screen. Meridian Industries. Dad's company. Your father's company, I confirmed. Where I am now his ultimate supervisor. Sarah sank onto our second-hand couch like her legs had given out. Oh my God. Mark, please tell me this is some kind of joke. Do I look like I'm joking? I sat down beside her, careful to maintain distance. 4 months of interviews, background checks, references. They headhunted me based on my work with Richardson and Associates. The consulting firm nobody's ever heard of, according to your father. This is insane. Sarah buried her face in her hands. Dad's worked there for 18 years. It's his entire identity. And now she looked up sharply. Wait. The rumors he mentioned about management changes. He was talking about you. He was talking about me while complaining to me about me, I said. The irony was incredible. My phone buzzed with another call. Roger's contact photo filled the screen, a picture from last Christmas where he was wearing his world's greatest dad sweater and looking smugly satisfied with life. Answer it, Sarah said quietly. I swiped to accept. Hello, Roger. Mark. His voice sounded like he'd been gargling gravel. We need to talk. Tonight. I'm having dinner with my wife. It's been a long day. Please. The word came out cracked, desperate. Roger Hartley, the man who'd lectured me about backbone and vision, was begging. 30 minutes. The Starbucks on 5th Street. I'll explain everything to Sarah later, but right now, I need to speak with you alone. Sarah was watching my face, reading every micro-expression with the clinical precision she used to assess patients in crisis. He sounds terrified, she whispered. 1 hour, I said into the phone. And Roger? This conversation stays between us until I decide otherwise. After I hung up, Sarah grabbed my hands. Mark, whatever happened between you two on Friday, whatever he said that hurt you, please don't let it destroy our family. Dad's not perfect, but he's still my father. I'm not trying to destroy anything, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if that was entirely true. But I'm done being his verbal punching bag. I'm done watching you make excuses for his behavior. And I'm definitely done pretending that 18 years of seniority trumps actual competence. Sarah's eyes filled with fresh tears. What does this mean for us? For our marriage? The question hung between us like a guillotine blade. I thought about the formal warnings in Roger's personnel file, about David Chen's assessment of his toxic impact on team morale, about the inevitable reckoning that was coming whether I wanted it or not. That depends, I said finally, on whether your father can learn to treat me with basic human respect. And if he can't? I stood up, checking my watch. 6:47 p.m. Roger would already be driving to Starbucks, probably rehearsing apologies he'd never had to make before. Then we'll find out exactly how much his pride is worth. The Starbucks on 5th Street was nearly empty at 7:15 p.m. on a Monday, just a few college students with laptops and a barista who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Roger sat in the corner booth furthest from the counter, hunched over a black coffee he hadn't touched. His BMW X5 was parked directly outside the window, as if he needed a quick escape route. He'd aged a decade since this morning. The confident man who'd carved up my character at Olive Garden looked hollow, diminished. His usually perfect tie was askew, and his shirt had wrinkled during what I imagined had been hours of anxious pacing. Mark, he said as I approached, half standing before thinking better of it and settling back down. Thank you for coming. I ordered a medium coffee, black, like his, and slid into the booth across from him. The silence stretched uncomfortably until I decided not to make this easy for him. You wanted to talk, I said finally. Roger's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his cup. How long have you known? About the position, I mean. 4 months. Since May 15th, when Meridian's executive search firm first contacted me. His face crumpled. Jesus Christ. 4 months. You sat through 4 months of family dinners, letting me. He trailed off, apparently unable to vocalize what he put me through. Letting you call me a failure. Letting you humiliate me in front of your family. Letting you explain to anyone who'd listen why your daughter married beneath her. I kept my voice level, professional. Yeah, Roger. I let you. I didn't know. You didn't know because you never bothered to actually understand what I do for a living. Richardson and Associates isn't some no-name consulting firm. We've restructured operations for half the Fortune 500 companies in the Southeast. My project portfolio over the past 3 years is worth $47 million in client value. Roger stared at his coffee like it might contain answers. The things I said Friday night were the same things you've been saying for 2 years. Friday wasn't an aberration, Roger. It was just the most recent example. I leaned forward slightly. Tell me about your conversation with David Chen Friday morning. The question hit him like a physical blow. His shoulders sagged further, and when he looked up, his eyes were bloodshot. You know about that. I know you cornered your supervisor in a parking lot and accused upper management of hiring unqualified outsiders. I know you created enough of a scene that HR issued a formal written warning. Your 4th one. I paused, letting that sink in. I also know that one more incident means immediate termination. Are you going to fire me? The words came out barely above a whisper. The honest answer was complicated. Roger's technical knowledge was valuable, but his resistance to change was toxic. David Chen had made it clear that half the department walked on eggshells around him. From a purely business perspective, replacing him would probably improve overall productivity within 6 months. But this wasn't purely business. This was Sarah's father. This was family dinners and Christmas mornings and the grandfather my future children would know. That depends entirely on you, I said. David briefed me on your history of undermining change initiatives. The inventory system you've been protecting. It's costing the company $180,000 annually in inefficiency. The training program you've been sabotaging. It would reduce processing errors by 63%. Roger's jaw worked silently for several seconds. I've been there 18 years, Mark. I've seen consultants come and go with their fancy presentations and buzzword solutions. Half of them don't last 2 years before moving on to the next company. But this consultant isn't moving on, I replied. This consultant is your son-in-law. This consultant will be at every family gathering for the next 30 years, assuming we can figure out how to make this work. The weight of that reality seemed to hit him all at once. Roger Hartley, who'd built his identity around being the successful patriarch, the man with steady employment and a BMW X5, was now dependent on the professional mercy of the failure he'd spent years mocking. What do you want from me? He asked. Respect, I said simply. Professional competence. An end to the public character assassination. I finished my coffee, checking my watch. And Roger? An apology to your daughter for putting her in the middle of this mess for 2 years. He nodded slowly, like a man accepting his sentence. One more thing, I added, standing to leave. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp, you'll attend voluntary retraining on our new digital systems. You'll participate constructively. You'll ask questions instead of providing resistance. Because everyone in that department is going to be watching how this plays out. Roger looked up at me with something that might have been the beginning of respect. Or maybe just fear. Either way, it was a start. The next morning arrived like a reckoning. I was at my desk by 7:30 a.m., reviewing the digital systems training materials that Roger would be subjected to in 30 minutes. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was literally preparing to teach my father-in-law the skills he'd need to keep the job I now controlled. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Dad left the house at 6:45. Haven't seen him this nervous since his heart palpitations last year. Please be gentle. Gentle. As if the past 2 years of systematic humiliation had been gentle. As if Friday night's public execution of my character had been gentle. At 7:52 a.m., I watched through my office window as Roger's BMW X5 pulled into the employee parking lot. He sat in his car for nearly 3 full minutes. I could see him gripping the steering wheel, probably giving himself a pep talk about swallowing his pride and learning from the son-in-law he'd written off as worthless. David Chin appeared in my doorway at exactly 8 o'clock. Roger's here for the training session. Conference room C. But Mark, we have a problem. My stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Words gotten out. About your relationship to Roger. David's expression was grim. Janet from accounting mentioned to someone that you looked familiar from the Christmas party. By yesterday afternoon, half the building knew you're his son-in-law. This morning, I've had 4 different employees ask me if Roger's getting special treatment because of family connections. The situation had just become exponentially more complicated. Managing Roger's performance was one thing. Managing the appearance of nepotism, or reverse nepotism, was another beast entirely. How's the department reacting? Mixed. Some people think it's poetic justice. Roger's been condescending to everyone for years, now he has to answer to someone he can't intimidate. Others are worried you'll either fire him out of spite or protect him regardless of performance. David paused. There's also a betting pool. A betting pool. $23 so far. Odds are 3:1 that Roger doesn't make it through his first performance review. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. And Roger knows people are talking. Oh, he knows. Maria Santos said he looked like he was going to vomit when he walked past the break room this morning. 3 people stopped their conversations mid-sentence when they saw him. This was rapidly spiraling beyond my control. I'd wanted professional vindication, not a workplace spectacle that could undermine my authority before I'd been on the job for 48 hours. Change of plans, I said, standing up. I'm personally conducting Roger's training session. Publicly. I want the entire department to see exactly how this is going to work. David's eyebrows shot up. Are you sure that's wise? If he has another meltdown in front of everyone, then everyone will know that family relationships don't trump professional standards, I finished. But if I hide behind closed doors, they'll assume I'm either protecting him or plotting against him. At 8:15 a.m., I walked into conference room C where Roger sat alone at the oval table, staring at a stack of training manuals like they were written in hieroglyphics. He'd positioned himself facing away from the window, probably trying to avoid the curious glances from employees pretending to work at their desks. Good morning, Mr. Hartley, I said formally, loud enough for anyone listening outside the door. Ready to learn our new inventory management system? Roger met my eyes with something that looked suspiciously like gratitude. Yes, sir. I'm ready to learn. The next 2 hours would determine whether Roger Hartley could evolve from my biggest critic into a functional employee. And whether I could prove that being right felt better than being vindictive. The training session became a masterclass in swallowing pride. For 2 hours, I watched Roger Hartley, the man who declared me incompetent at every family gathering, struggle through basic inventory software like a first grader learning to read. His fingers pecked uncertainly at the keyboard while I explained concepts he dismissed as consultant nonsense just weeks ago. The automated tracking reduces manual input errors by 73%, I explained, pulling up a comparison chart. Your current system requires 14 checkpoints. This streamlines it to 4. Roger nodded slowly, his jaw tight with concentration. So the computer automatically flags discrepancies that I've been catching manually? Exactly. But faster and with better accuracy. I kept my tone neutral, professional, though part of me wanted to add, remember when you said computers couldn't understand nuances? Through the conference room's glass walls, I could see employees pretending to work while actually watching our interaction. Maria Santos was being particularly obvious about it, filing the same document 3 times while craning her neck toward us. At 10:30 a.m., we took a break. Roger excused himself to the restroom, and David Chen immediately appeared at my elbow. How's it going? He asked quietly. Better than expected. He's actually trying. I closed the training manual, rubbing my eyes. David, I need you to run interference with the gossip. This circus atmosphere isn't helping anyone. Already on it. I've reminded 3 people that we have actual work to do. David paused, checking his phone. But Mark, there's something else. I just got a call from Regional Director Patricia Kim. She's heard about the situation. My blood turned to ice water. What kind of call? The kind where she wants a meeting. Today. 2 p.m. Her office. David's expression was grim. Someone reached out to her about potential conflicts of interest. She's concerned about how this reflects on the department. Patricia Kim, the woman who'd welcomed me to the Meridian family just yesterday morning, was now questioning my judgment before I'd completed my first week. The betting pool in the break room was looking prophetic. When Roger returned from the restroom, his face was ashen. Mark, I need to tell you something. Before someone else does. What now? He glanced around the conference room, then lowered his voice to barely above a whisper. Linda, my wife, she called Sarah this morning. Told her about my job situation, about the warnings. Sarah knows everything now. The training manual slipped from my hands. Everything. That I've been on thin ice for months. That Friday's incident was my fourth strike. That you're. He swallowed hard. That you're the only reason I still have a job right now. My phone immediately started buzzing with texts. Sarah's name flashed on the screen repeatedly. Asterisk, why didn't you tell me Dad was about to be fired? Asterisk. Asterisk, how long have you known about his warnings? Asterisk. Asterisk, are you keeping him employed out of pity? Asterisk. Asterisk, we need to talk. Now. Asterisk. Roger was watching my face as I read through Sarah's messages. She's upset, he said quietly. Not at you. At me. For putting you in this position. His voice cracked slightly. She said I've been using her as a shield to attack you for years, and now you're the one protecting our family's income. The irony was suffocating. Friday night, Roger had publicly questioned my ability to provide for his daughter. Today, his daughter was realizing that I was literally providing for her parents. Mr. Hartley, I said formally, aware that several employees had drifted closer to the conference room, will continue this training tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. sharp. Mark, he said, dropping the professional facade for a moment. Thank you. I know I don't deserve. You're right. You don't. I stood up, gathering the training materials. But Sarah deserves better than watching her family implode because her father couldn't control his ego. As I walked back toward my office, I could feel 43 pairs of eyes tracking my movement. The betting pool was probably being adjusted in real time. At 2 p.m., I'd have to convince Patricia Kim that I could manage family dynamics without compromising professional standards. At 6 p.m., I'd have to convince my wife that keeping her father employed wasn't a mistake I'd regret forever. The phone in my pocket kept buzzing with Sarah's increasingly frantic messages. This was about to get much worse before it got better. The meeting with Patricia Kim felt like walking into a tribunal. Her corner office on the 15th floor commanded a view of the entire city, floor-to-ceiling windows that made visitors feel simultaneously elevated and exposed. She sat behind a glass desk that probably cost more than most people's cars, her expression unreadable behind wire-rimmed reading glasses. Mark, please sit. She gestured to the chair across from her, then closed whatever file she'd been reviewing. We need to discuss the Roger Hartley situation. My mouth went dry. What specifically would you like to discuss? I received a call this morning from Janet Morrison in accounting. Apparently, the entire third floor is buzzing with speculation about your family connection to an employee with documented performance issues. Patricia removed her glasses, cleaning them with deliberate precision. Then I received another call from David Chen about yesterday's personnel briefing and how you opted to personally handle Mr. Hartley's retraining. The air conditioning hummed overhead, filling the silence while I calculated my response. I believe transparency was the best approach, given the circumstances. Transparency. She set down her glasses, fixing me with the kind of stare that had probably made executives twice my age squirm. Mark, in your enthusiasm for transparency, did you consider how this appears to the board of directors who just invested considerable resources in recruiting you? The question hit like a physical blow. I'm not sure I follow. Let me paint you a picture. Our new VP of Operations, hired through an expensive executive search process, is now personally training an insubordinate employee who happens to be his father-in-law. An employee who, according to HR records, has been actively undermining the exact type of operational changes you were brought here to implement. Patricia pulled out a tablet, scrolling through what looked like internal communications. This morning alone, I fielded 3 separate inquiries about potential conflicts of interest. My career was imploding in real time. Patricia, I can assure you that. I'm not finished. Her voice carried the authority of someone who'd survived corporate politics for 20 years. At 11:47 a.m., I received an email from Regional Director Thomas Morrison, Janet's husband, coincidentally, suggesting that perhaps the Hartley situation requires external HR oversight to ensure proper protocols are followed. The blood drained from my face. External HR oversight meant investigation, documentation, potential termination for cause. 3 days into my dream job, and I was facing the possibility of career suicide over Roger's inability to keep his mouth shut. What are my options? I asked quietly. Patricia leaned back in her chair, her expression softening slightly. Option 1, immediately transfer Roger Hartley to another department, remove yourself from any direct supervisory role, and hope this blows over. Option 2, terminate his employment based on his documented performance issues and eliminate the conflict entirely. And option 3. There is no option 3, Mark. Not if you want to survive your first 90 days. She opened the file she'd been reading when I arrived. I like you. Your credentials are impeccable, your restructuring proposals are exactly what this company needs, and frankly, you're the first VP we've hired who actually understands operational efficiency. My phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. Sarah's name appeared on the screen through the fabric. But I cannot protect you from board scrutiny if this situation escalates further, Patricia continued. The optics are simply too problematic. A family member with a history of insubordination, resisting the exact changes you were hired to implement, suddenly becoming your pet project? He's not my pet project, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if that was entirely true. Then prove it. Patricia slid a document across her glass desk. Roger Hartley's employment termination paperwork. Pre-drafted, based on his documented performance issues. Sign it, and this problem disappears. Refuse, and we'll schedule another meeting next week to discuss your own performance concerns. I stared at the termination papers, my signature line highlighted in yellow. 4 strikes. 18 years of employment. Sarah's father's entire identity, reduced to a legal document that would end his career and vindicate every cruel prediction he'd made about my character. Outside Patricia's windows, I could see the employee parking lot. Roger's BMW X5 sat in space seat 47, where he'd probably remain until exactly 5:30 p.m., the same schedule he'd maintained for 18 years. My phone buzzed again. Sarah's text appeared briefly on the lock screen. Dad's crying. I've never seen him cry. What happened? The pen felt like it weighed 50 pounds in my hand. I stared at Roger's termination papers, the yellow highlight around my signature line seeming to pulse under Patricia's office lighting. My phone had buzzed 3 more times in the last minute, Sarah's messages becoming increasingly desperate. I need 48 hours, I said finally, not touching the pen. Patricia's eyebrows rose. Mark, this isn't a negotiation. The board meeting is Thursday morning. If Roger Hartley is still your employee by then, you'll both be explaining this situation to 7 very unhappy executives. 48 hours, I repeated, standing up. If I can't resolve the conflict of interest by Wednesday at 5 p.m., I'll sign the papers myself. She studied my face for a long moment. What exactly do you think you can accomplish in 2 days that HR hasn't managed in 18 years? I'm going to give him the choice, I said. Early retirement package, lateral transfer to regional operations, or voluntary resignation with full benefits. Let him salvage some dignity instead of being terminated for cause. Patricia leaned back in her chair. The regional operations position was eliminated last quarter due to budget cuts. Early retirement requires board approval, which brings us back to the scrutiny problem. And voluntary resignation with full benefits? She shook her head. That's not how corporate downsizing works, Mark. My phone rang suddenly, not a text this time, but an actual call. Sarah's contact photo filled the screen, her smile from our anniversary dinner last month now feeling like a relic from a simpler time. I have to take this, I said. Patricia nodded curtly. Wednesday, 5 p.m. With or without your signature, this situation ends. I stepped into the hallway before answering. Sarah, I'm in a meeting. No. Her voice was sharp, strained. You're going to listen to me for 30 seconds. Dad just told me everything. About the warnings, about Friday's incident, about how you've been protecting his job while he's been. Her voice broke slightly. While he's been treating you like garbage for 2 years. Through the glass walls of Patricia's office, I could see her watching me, probably calculating whether my marriage was about to become another HR complication. Sarah, it's complicated. It's not complicated, Mark. It's simple. Her nursing training kicked in, that clinical clarity she used during medical emergencies. Dad's been a bully and a hypocrite. You've been covering for him to protect our family. And now your career is at risk because of his pride. I closed my eyes, leaning against the hallway wall. Where is he now? In their garage, reorganizing his toolbox for the 3rd time today. Mom says he does that when he's having anxiety attacks. Sarah's voice softened. Mark, he's terrified. Not just of losing his job, but of losing you. Of losing our family. He told Mom that firing him would be justice, but destroying our marriage would be his worst failure. A revelation hit me like lightning. Roger wasn't just afraid of professional consequences, he was afraid that forcing me to choose between my career and family loyalty would end his relationship with his daughter forever. I'll be home by 7, I said. We'll figure this out. Together. Together. After hanging up, I walked back into Patricia's office. She was typing on her laptop, probably documenting our conversation for the inevitable board inquiry. Patricia, I need to ask you something confidential. Hypothetically, if an employee with 18 years of service requested transfer to our Jacksonville facility, what would that process look like? She stopped typing. Jacksonville? Mark, we don't have operational positions in Jacksonville. No, I said slowly, an idea forming. But Richardson and Associates does. My former consulting firm. They've been trying to poach experienced operations coordinators for 6 months. Patricia's expression shifted from skepticism to cautious interest. You're talking about placing him with an external company? I'm talking about solving everyone's problem. Roger gets a fresh start somewhere his ego can recover. I eliminate the conflict of interest. The department moves forward without drama. I paused. And Richardson pays a $15,000 placement fee for qualified referrals. For the first time since I'd entered her office, Patricia smiled. Now that, she said, sounds like option 3. The next morning, I arrived at Meridian at 7:30 a.m. with a manila folder containing 3 documents that would change everything. Roger's Honda Civic, he traded in a BMW X5 yesterday, Sarah told me, sat in the employee lot like a white flag of surrender. At 8 a.m. sharp, I knocked on conference room C's door. Roger looked up from the training materials he'd been studying, his face gone from what Sarah described as the first sleepless night he's had since Vietnam. Good morning, Mr. Hartley. I sat down across from him, placing the folder on the table. Before we continue your training, I have a proposition. His hands trembled slightly as he set down his coffee. Mark, if this is about yesterday's meeting with Patricia Kim, it's about your future. I opened the folder, revealing the first document. Richardson and Associates, my former consulting firm, is expanding their Jacksonville operations. They need a senior operations coordinator with exactly your experience. Roger stared at the job description like it was written in a foreign language. I don't understand. $78,000 starting salary, full benefits, and a $5,000 signing bonus. It's a lateral move, not a demotion. Clean slate, new environment, no family complications. I slid the second document across the table. This is a letter of recommendation. I've highlighted your 18 years of technical expertise and institutional knowledge. You're helping me leave. His voice cracked with confusion. I'm giving you the same thing you never gave me, I said quietly. A choice. And respect for what you can accomplish when you're not busy protecting your ego. Roger picked up the job description with shaking hands. Why would you do this? After everything I've put you through? I thought about Friday night at Olive Garden, about the systematic humiliation, about Sarah caught between her father and her husband for 2 years. Then I thought about the man sitting across from me, diminished, scared, finally understanding the weight of his own words. Because Sarah loves you. Because despite everything, you raised an incredible daughter who somehow learned compassion even when you forgot to show it. I leaned forward. And because proving you wrong feels better than destroying you. The third document was Roger's voluntary resignation letter, effective in 2 weeks. Enough time for Richardson and Associates to process his application, for him to train his replacement, for the family gossip to die down. Mark, Roger said, his voice barely above a whisper. I owe you an apology. Not just for Friday night, but for 2 years of, he stopped, swallowing hard. I was threatened by you. By your education, your potential, the way Sarah looked at you like you could conquer the world. I wanted you to fail because your success made me feel small. I know. I called you a failure because I was terrified you'd prove I was the failure instead. Tears were forming in his eyes, the first time I'd ever seen Roger Hartley cry. You were right about everything. The inventory system, the digital processes, the resistance to change. I've been holding that department back for 3 years. At 9:15 a.m., David Chen knocked on the conference room door. Mark. Patricia Kim wants to see both of you. Now. In Patricia's office 15 minutes later, Roger placed his signed resignation letter on her glass desk with steady hands. Ma'am, I'm submitting my voluntary resignation to eliminate any conflicts of interest regarding my son-in-law's position here. Patricia read through the letter, then looked at the Richardson and Associates job offer. This is quite generous, Mr. Hartley. Mark arranged it, Roger said. Even after I spent 2 years trying to convince everyone he was incompetent. He turned to me, extending his hand. Congratulations on becoming everything I said you couldn't, son. For the first time in 7 years, Roger Hartley's handshake felt like respect instead of judgment. The betting pool paid out 3:1 odds that Roger wouldn't survive his first performance review. They were right. He'd survived something much more important instead.